Poilievre explodes, demands Carney divest amid shocking conflict of interest scandal. The snap federal election held on April 28, 2025, was more than a turning point in Canada's political calendar. It triggered a seismic reckoning about public trust and leadership integrity. At the heart of the storm stood Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who launched into an explosive campaign targeting newly elected Prime Minister Mark Carney. Their feud wasn't over slogans or partisanship. It was about ethics. Poilievre didn't mince words. He called out what he framed as an outrageous betrayal of public trust, Carney's alleged conflict of interest tied to a powerful blind trust full of undisclosed holdings. The tension didn't just dominate headlines, it reshaped how Canadians viewed their leaders. The spark came from documents revealing Carney's financial arrangements. Although he had told voters that his personal wealth was limited to cash and real estate, it was later revealed that Carney was the beneficiary of a blind trust packed with hundreds of investments. These weren't neutral assets. The trust held shares in sectors that stood to gain directly from federal spending: housing, energy, infrastructure, and even technology ventures that lobby the government. While Carney insisted the trust was legally compliant, the public didn't need a courtroom to know something felt off. Canadians were furious. They wanted honesty, not carefully crafted disclosures. Poilievre, sensing an opportunity to represent the frustrations of average Canadians, went on the offensive. He blasted Carney at rallies, in interviews, and across social media. His words were sharp. Mark Carney cannot lead this country while holding private stakes in the industries his government funds. That's not leadership. That's self-interest. He demanded that Carney divest from the trust immediately and submit to a full ethics review. The call wasn't just political theater. It resonated with voters, particularly those who already felt abandoned by the Ottawa elite. Carney, cool and composed, stuck to the technical defense. He maintained that the trust had been independently managed, legally constructed, and reviewed by ethics officers. But for many Canadians, this wasn't about rules, it was about values. Legal compliance doesn't always equal ethical leadership. And in a political climate already charged with frustration over affordability, housing, and public services, Carney's calm explanations landed like ice water on an open wound. It wasn't just what he said, it was how distant he seemed while saying it. Poilievre turned that emotional gap into a rallying point. He traveled to working-class neighborhoods, rural towns, and overcrowded city centers, pointing out the growing disconnect between government insiders and the public. Carney's investments are booming while you can't afford groceries, he shouted in a packed hall in Scarborough. That message wasn't just rhetorical, it was anchored in the lived experience of thousands of Canadians facing rent hikes, stagnant wages, and ballooning debt. Poilievre's campaign became more than opposition, it became a crusade. Carney tried to counter by highlighting his experience and economic record. He spoke of stability, fiscal credibility, and his ability to manage crises. But many voters weren't listening anymore. To them, Carney embodied the technocratic elite, educated, globally connected, but painfully disconnected from the concerns of ordinary citizens. Even his greatest strength, economic expertise, became a weakness when voters perceived it as a shield behind which he avoided hard moral decisions. Voters weren't angry that Carney was rich. They were angry that he was governing a country in crisis, while profiting from sectors that many believed required public, not private, stewardship. Other political leaders weighed in. Jagmeet Singh of the NDP called for reforms to Canada's ethics framework, demanding real-time disclosures and tougher penalties for misleading financial declarations. Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet accused Ottawa of becoming a playground for powerful insiders, while provinces like Quebec got sidelined. Together, the opposition painted a picture of a federal government increasingly at odds with transparency, accountability, and fairness. The scandal began to transcend parties. It became symbolic of everything Canadians distrusted about centralized power. A defining moment came when Poilievre held a major rally outside a downtown Ottawa conference center. It was overcast and cold, but that didn't stop hundreds from showing up with handmade signs reading, "Divest now," and "Lead or Leave." Poilievre, flanked by candidates and veterans, delivered a fiery speech. "This isn't just about a blind trust," he said, his voice echoing off steel walls. "This is about restoring faith. You cannot lead a country while secretly profiting from its problems." The speech wasn't just watched, it was shared, dissected, and turned into one of the most viral campaign clips of the election. Carney's response came from afar. At an international summit, he appeared virtually, reaffirming that his trust remained sealed and that he welcomed an ethics investigation. But for many, the image of a remote, suited man in a private room didn't inspire confidence. It reinforced the very narrative Poilievre had built. That Carney was out of touch, that he governed from a distance, and that, at a moment demanding courage, he had chosen comfort. The election results reflected the controversy's impact. Carney retained power, but just barely. The Liberals were reduced to a shaky minority, losing key battlegrounds in Ontario and the prairies. Meanwhile, Poilievre's Conservatives surged in popular vote, dominating the national conversation even as he lost his own seat in Carleton. It wasn't just a result, it was a warning shot. Canadians wanted answers, and more importantly, they wanted change. They didn't just want competence, they demanded character. Now, as Parliament reconvenes, the pressure on Carney continues to mount. Civic groups, journalists, and opposition MPs are demanding full divestment and reforms to Canada's ethics laws. Carney's team insists he's done nothing wrong. But the damage has been done. The trust deficit is real. Poilievre, undeterred by his narrow personal loss, has vowed to reintroduce legislation that would make blind trusts obsolete and require all elected officials to publicly disclose financial interests in real time. What started as a financial footnote turned into a national referendum on ethical leadership. The campaign trail exposed a deeper truth. Canadians are tired of being led by people who play by different rules. The scandal may fade from headlines, but the expectations it awakened will remain. Canadians are watching, not just for policy but for principle. And they're no longer willing to accept silence, even when it's technically within the rules.